What's up?
Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check. Can you hear me? Mic check, 1, 2. Yeah, it's me. Sorry, I'm not making a special appearance today. But you can see me on the 5 and 6 o'clock in the tonight. What do you mean? I can widen up the size, or whenever something comes up. Oh yeah, I think he's all even if they threaten us. Yeah, if it happens casually during work hours, it's a little complicated.
I have my turbo shot on, my mic for everything. I have to do my check. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hey.
I noticed either that or like he was doing a bad job. There were too many gaps. It wasn't keeping on course. It was restructured. I was impressed with the opportunity to restructure the whole process. Okay.
He was like,
It doesn't seem it doesn't move us forward. Anything but. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Oh, always. The wheels are always outwardly, yeah.
Hi, everybody.
All right.
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Ready?
Yeah, absolutely. You bet.
Commissioner, are you ready? Okay, I'm going to
Hi.
see it and we'll
All right,
keep
good.
going.
Sounds good.
I'll come. Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're here today to talk about the Missoula storm that occurred last Wednesday evening. First, you're going to hear from Mayor Davis and Commissioner Slotnick together, and then you're going to hear from Missoula City Fire Chief Gordy Hughes and Missoula County Office of Emergency Management Director Adriane Beck. Following that, we'll have questions, and we'll try and keep this to a half an hour, but we also have some city staff here to help answer questions. We have Eric Dixon from County Public Works, Jeremy Keene from City Public Works, Morgan Valiant from Parks, and Randy Arnold from County Lands, Culture, and Recreation. Thanks, Commissioner. Without any further ado, Commissioner Slotnick and Mayor Davis.
Thank you very much. Nick Holloway, thank you so much for everything that you have and continue to do for the Office of Emergency Management. It's such a pleasure to work alongside these incredible professionals. This has been an intense few days, to say the least, for Missoula, Missoulians, and the surrounding area. Our resilience has showed up in amazing ways. It really has showed the love for each other and the love for this community. Local government agencies mobilized immediately Wednesday evening to prioritize life safety following the storm. I have to be honest, it was during the storm. I'm so grateful that we have had no reported deaths or injuries as a result. Really, it's remarkable. And beyond that, though, we both wish to acknowledge just how incredible this has upended many people's lives. Despite where we are today, many people in our community really were challenged significantly with what this storm caused. And I want to go back to how resilient we are as a community, and yet acknowledging the pain that many people really did and have suffered as a result of it. City Fire, Public Works, our city police department, County Public Works, they all worked day and night and continue to make it possible for power companies to actually get around our community, to drive the roads and to get downed power lines and poles out of the way by removing trees, debris, and limbs and other dangers. We know that there is extensive damage to the urban forest. Right now, as of this moment, we know that we have lost about 600 city trees in the right-of-way only, and that does not include our public parks. And in 2015, when we had a major storm event, we lost about 120 to 150 trees. We are thinking that we are going to be upwards of loss of around 1,000 city-owned trees just from this event. And I am not talking about anybody's private property. So that is the reason for the enormity of the debris removal situation, in which, of course, the professionals will talk more about here in a bit. But it's very substantial. So with that, I want to thank first responders who quite literally, were on the ball Wednesday night. All of our city and county employees who have continued to work extensively throughout this whole process to make it so we are here together today. I also want to thank some folks from other communities that have stepped in mutual aid to help Missoula. I want to do a special call out for Team Rubicon, this amazing group of folks who come in regionally, or really national, to be able to deploy their professional skills here in Missoula. The city of Helena has sent over arborists, and folks from their parks department are coming over today to continue to help with the tree debris situation and removal that we're working on. The Department of Natural Resources are providing staff to help with, again, tree removal, debris removal. Missoula Aging Services, they have a group of volunteers that came down and helped with our call center, the Red Cross, for standing up a facility where people could take showers, plug in medical devices, and get some air conditioning. In addition to that, we had a number of community organizations and faith-based organizations that did the same thing. I was honored to work with the community emergency response team, and so was Josh. We were there on different days. I was there on Saturday, he was there on Sunday, when there was an effort at Fort Missoula Regional Park to be able to hand out ice and water to folks that had been without power for a long time and needed to be able to access ice and water. The National Guard joined us there. That was incredible. We had about 1,000 cars come through just on Saturday alone. And while that was happening, and this is really, I think, symbolic of the resiliency of our community, we had over about 1,500 people show up at the pavilion to celebrate with Community Hospital and the NICU families. The Lily Society, or excuse me, the Iris Society of Missoula still managed to have their event there. People were, kids were playing soccer, people were actually out walking amongst this all happening at Fort Missoula at the same time. And to me, it just really resembles the life is going on despite this response and recovery effort. So I just wanted to mention also that the thing that was so cool when I was at the Fort Missoula was that families were coming through, or people were coming through and literally getting out of their car and wanting to give hugs because of the camaraderie that people felt when they were supportive of one another. And I think that that is something that has been just remarkable. We were talking today about how in a lot of ways this is such a great equalizer. There were people that were coming through with vehicles that looked like they could almost barely run, and then vehicles that were very nice and expensive, and it didn't matter. Folks needed water and folks needed ice, and it was really a great equalizer in some sense of community coming together and really supporting one another. So the last thing I want to mention is that I appreciate the outpouring of response that we've had from everyday citizens wanting to volunteer. The United Way of Missoula County has quickly stepped up to expand their volunteer platform, and on their website under volunteermissoula.org, people that want to volunteer, especially to help with private property, you're helping neighbors or helping people that you don't know, you can actually get on a list to be signed up with a community organization. And if you are in need of help, go to that same website, which is volunteermissoula.org, explain what you're looking for, and then you'll get paired up with volunteers. There are going to be other opportunities. This is both for folks that are looking for help as well as homeowners, and we appreciate the Missoula Organization of Realtors stepping up in that sense as well to help homeowners that have been displaced. So we're this is going to be an iterative process. You're going to hear us say that over and over. We're constantly figuring out how to get better and more information to you. But mostly I just want to say thank you all. I want to thank the incredible professionals and folks in this room that have stepped up to help us respond and recover.
Thanks, Mayor. First, thank you all for coming. I know that everybody could be doing other things right now, but thanks a lot for coming out. I want to start this by acknowledging that more than 45,000 customers lost power. Now, customer can mean a house, can mean an office, or a retail place, or a restaurant. Kind of doesn't matter in this. What I'm saying here is that almost everybody was directly affected. And if you weren't directly affected, you were indirectly affected. And as we all know, a couple hours without power is an inconvenience. A day is a disruption. And so many people's lives were upended, fully disrupted. No power meant certain medical devices weren't available. If you live outside of city limits, no power means no water. No power means your food in your refrigerator isn't going to make it, or the meat in your freezer. Really want to acknowledge that we all live this together. We all see it. Our brothers and sisters in Missoula, and when I say Missoula, I don't mean the city or the county, all of us. We just lived through something really hard, and people experienced a ton of pain and real disruption, and it's going to take a while to bounce back from that. I also want to relate one little lesson I learned here. It was the night of the storm, and my wife and I were driving back from north of Missoula, and I'm about to blame Shane Stack for this, Director of Public Works, because Shane had bragged to me about what a great job his staff had done reconstructing and paving Deshaw Lane, and they did do a good job. So he said, the next time you're in that area, make sure you drive down it because it looks sharp. And I really like Shane, and he's a great professional. So I said to my wife, let's take the back way. Blame Shane Stack. So we went down Deshaw Lane to Mullen, to Kona, to Big Flat, so we could get to my house, which is on the other side of the bridge. We're driving down Big Flat Road, come around a corner, and there's a tree blocking the road. There's a car behind us and a car behind them. We quickly get out. Can we pull this tree out? It is way too big. So we'll spin around, go back the other way, and we hit another tree. And I'm standing there thinking, okay, I think I have a cotton rope. If we rig this up, I'm looking for the hook underneath the car, and I hear the woman behind me, shout out to Raylyn and Maddie P. We have to get the blank out of here because trees are now going like boom, boom, boom. And we took refuge in somebody's driveway off a big flat road. Thank you, whoever that was, so we didn't get smashed by trees. We waited out the storm there, probably 45 minutes, and then drove back out on the road. But now there's not one tree here and one tree there. There's like a dozen trees. And there's our 3 cars, but between the other chunks of trees, there are more cars. And we're kind of standing there like, wow, what do we do now? And there's no bars, and even if there were, 911 is overwhelmed. In the queue, 911, the queue was working, but they're in the queue. And in short order, we saw people with headlamps coming from below Big Flat Road and above with chainsaws. And all these people work together. The ones with chainsaws carving up logs, everybody else pulling tree limbs out of the way. And what I saw was uncomplicated cooperation and uncomplicated kindness. Nobody's standing there being like, well, I think you should grab that part of the tree and then we'll pull it. No, people just dove in. And in what felt like short order, one lane was carved out and all these cars got to move again. Now, it's terrible to be caught in a disaster, but I feel really fortunate to get to witness what I saw. An expression, an acknowledgement that we actually are all in this together. And maybe the lesson learned here, can we carry that spirit back into regular life? If we act with uncomplicated cooperation, everybody wins. The greatest benefit to the greatest number. Super impressed with how people worked, just regular people. Also, super impressed how our professionals worked, and you're going to hear from them shortly. I do want to shout out my friend Shane Stack, if I can forgive him for making me go the back way. In short order, Missoula County Public Works was out clearing roads where trees were not on power lines, but where trees were just down on roads. In far corners of the county, like up in Sealy and in Condon and in Lolo, working at all hours, relentlessly, tirelessly, to make it so that people could get where they needed to go. This was an unprecedented disaster, as our mayor has described. We've never seen any tree damage like this before. And there will be lessons learned, and we responded really well. I'm going to leave it at that and hand you to professionals who can actually describe the nuts and bolts of what happened. And we need to be super thankful that we have these experts and professionals in emergency management in our midst that work with the city and the county. In the world of emergency management, those jurisdictional boundaries don't mean anything. They just did what needed to be done. Here you go. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Davis and Commissioner Slotnick. So I'm Adriane Beck. I'm the director for the Missoula Office of Emergency Management, which has the responsibility of our kind of emergency operations planning and exercising of those plans. And we really got an opportunity to exercise many components of that plan as a result of this storm. Put it in context, during the storm, our 911 center took about 1,200 911 calls, 911 emergency calls on the 3-digit 911 line. People who experienced that call didn't get picked up right away. That system is as designed. We only can take in so many calls at once. Only a certain number of circuits are available. And so we have an agreement with Flathead County that when that happens, those calls, those 911 calls, roll over to the Flathead Dispatch Center where they can take the call and get that information back down to us on back channel lines. When this storm rolled through Missoula City and in other parts of the county, it became immediately obvious from reports that were coming from responders in the field, the scale and scope of this was a true emergency. And so in order to open up our emergency operations plan and start exercising some of the authorities that are granted within that plan, I called Mayor Davis at 11:30 at night and requested that she declare a local emergency. What that enables us to do is to start doing things in unconventional ways, moving resources that don't typically work in certain areas so that we could address the most critical needs in a priority fashion. Early the next morning, or later that day, if you want to talk about it that way, as reports started to come in from damage experienced in other communities out throughout the county, it became evident that it was appropriate to issue an emergency proclamation for the county as well. And so Commissioner Strohmeyer did that on Thursday morning. Again, just allows us the opportunity to flex and move and to prioritize what we're going to do in the moment. When these things happen, oftentimes we have to look at what's right in front of us right now and then try to future forecast as to what is going to be the next problem so that we can mitigate that to the best of our ability. And so in the early stages, it was determining all the 911 calls that had come in and ensuring that we provided a response or got eyes on to everything that was reported through 911. And Chief Hughes will talk through that kind of Herculean effort with his crews. Next was to assess kind of what was online and what was offline. We knew very early on that we had significant power outages. In talking with Northwest Energy, with their operations center, and Missoula Electric Co-op, we were estimating to be in that 40,000 without power, and we're going to be without power due to the debris and damage to the power line infrastructure. What that kicked us in to do is start to assess our critical facilities to ensure that we can continue kind of providing critical services. So assessing all of our mountaintop sites to ensure that generator power did in fact come back on and that we weren't going to lose communication with our emergency responders. Checking with our hospitals to do the same, to make sure that their generator backups came online and that they were able to provide their essential services, as well as checking in with water and wastewater. We did lose power to those facilities, but we were able to keep them running with generator power. Then it's the game of prioritizing the limited amount of generators that we have to determine what is the highest need based on what essential services we needed to keep up so that we can take care of the most people that we can. Along with that prioritization is taking the resources that we have and dedicating that to clearing critical access roads. So looking at fire lanes first and then moving out to other roads for two primary purposes. One, to ensure that we can get emergency services and essential services to wherever we can within the city and the county. And they did a tremendous amount of work before the sun even came up. In that we were able to ensure access to most parts of the county and the city. As that priority kind of gets checked off the list, or as that task gets checked off the list, we have roads open. Now the public is driving on the roads. We still don't have power to our traffic signal infrastructure. So that prioritization of generators and figuring out which traffic signals are going to have the best impact, which intersections are causing the most chaos. That's part of the work that we were doing in the Emergency Operations Center, working in close coordination with all the departments and agencies that were involved with that. As this scale and scope of this continues to change, and the needs continue to change, our priorities will continue to change. So as an example, early on, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was on the phone with the American Red Cross saying we are going to have significant population without power. We need to stand up an emergency powering center, essentially, so that people who have essential personal powered devices have the capability to get that charged. That operation will cease as more and more power comes online. As more and more people have power back to their houses, that operation will go away. Similar to water and ice distribution. As more and more people have the capacity to get their refrigerators turned back on, water, all those things, those services may go away. And then we may start to deal with debris, right? The big elephant in the room that we're going to have to eat one bite at a time. But we're going to think about how we do that in a strategic way and start thinking about the long-term debris management plan. And so we have a lot of very fine individuals who are very skilled and adept at doing incident management and planning out for those types of things. And they're busy at work, which is why they're not here. I'll turn it over to Chief Hughes.
Thanks, Adriane. Gordy Hughes, the Fire Chief with the Missoula Fire Department. Talk a little bit of our response Wednesday night. Quite chaotic, as these events usually are as they unfold. Triaging becomes a priority for us, and where our most impacted hazard exists. So that becomes very difficult to ferret out when you have 12,000 calls coming into the 911 center and trying to triage those calls in a priority manner so that we are dealing with life safety up front and close. That's our priority number one, of course, is keep people safe and respond to those that are in the desperate need immediately. We had, amongst our original 5 units from the 5 stations that we have in the city, we called in 3 additional crews and another battalion chief to run what ended up splitting the city in half, north of the river and then south of the river, and mobilized our resources to take those calls, triaging as we went in those areas. It was a great mobilization from City PD, Parks and Rec, Streets Department. We were on top of that blockage at the bottom of Linda Vista that created a very snarled situation, landlocked our Station 5 crew for quite some time until they could figure out that we have to drive all the way around Hagen Drive to get all the way to the top of Linda Vista Boulevard and then provide a response there. So very dynamic in the making, and our crews did an awesome job of hitting all those calls. And with our cooperators as well, Missoula Rural Fire Department, East Missoula, everybody was hopping. We were geared up for Miller Peak fire to blow up and didn't necessarily see what we see today and all those power lines. The snow event that we had years ago, it broke limbs. It didn't take down power lines like it did this storm. Created a very hazardous situation, and by what Mayor Davis mentioned, not a single fatality. Scrapes, bumps, and bruises from those that were injured in the event, so very fortunate. We still had to respond to other people with other medical emergencies, heart attacks. You know, life goes on in these events, and we still have to respond to those emergencies as they unfold. So that response was heroic in our folks, and I can't commend them more than than they should be. Moving on to, we're still in the response mode, so until we can securely say that electricity's been restored to all, there aren't any other hazards that we have to mitigate, but those hazards are going to exist while we're entering the recovery. I'm talking about those hanging tree limbs caught up in trees right now that the next wind event could certainly pose a large risk to the community at large. Look up, folks. Take a gander if you're by a tree. Make sure that you're safe and where you park your vehicles. And if your house is at risk, we will be providing some information via a QR code where that people can hopefully report extreme risk to life safety. We are inundated with debris management right now. 600 city trees. If you can imagine one of those large maple trees and then take that times 600, put that in a parking lot, and how many can you stack on top of each other? That is incredible volume of debris. And parks and streets, those folks are doing the best they can to take those piles down to a manageable size, transfer them to the compost facility, but we're going to end up more than likely setting up chipping sites and possibly some other management tools that we will have at our disposal going forward. We are still in fire restrictions, stage 2 restrictions. So, you know, let the responders and those emergency folks utilize the gas-powered chainsaws after the 1 o'clock curfew for the hoot owl restrictions. I know folks are going to want to do their best to take care of their issues, their debris that they have to take care of in their own residences. But the last thing we need is to ignite some wildfires within the urban interface here, and I really caution folks to adhere to those stage 2 restrictions. Be mindful, again, of your neighbors, those that are in need of special needs and assistance. Reach out, touch base, just be neighborly and do those check-ins, if you would. And I guess with that, I would open the floor to questions.
Could you just clarify what you just said, Chief, on the hoot owl? And so in other words, emergency responders and others under the orders can use chainsaws and devices, but you still don't want folks to do it in the afternoons with the fire?
That's correct, Dennis. Good point. Yes, we generally come with water when we utilize those tools. So if we ignite a fire, we can quickly put that fire out. But, you know, general public, I know they want to do what's best and try to take care of their own, but like I mentioned, we just don't need any added work on top of our plate.
Quick question, emergency declaration, did it come from the governor or from, and if so, was it an emergency declaration, disaster declaration, and what does Missoula and Missoula County qualify for in those statutes?
You bet. Thank you for that question. So locally, we declare an emergency to acknowledge the situation that is in front of us, and that we're going to have to do things a little bit different and spend money that maybe we don't necessarily have budgeted, right? And what that does is then that allows us kind of that step 1 of a 3-step process is to declare locally. And then we request that the state declare as well when we meet certain thresholds of the scale and scope or the amount of damage that has been experienced by not only.
Has that happened yet?
Yes. So we put in a request to Governor Gianforte for a state declaration that did come. And what we're in the process now of is obviously we're still in response mode. We're still trying to make sure we keep the lights on, right, and all of those things. But we're capturing that damage and we're understanding the situation such that, if appropriate, we have the opportunity to ask for a presidential disaster declaration. The utility of asking for a disaster declaration at the federal level is that opens up the opportunity to have FEMA assistance to the government to help cover some of those costs and some of those damages that are to local government.
Are the costs and damages out there yet? Do you have any estimates of how much damage there could be?
Right now, it's a little too early to say what our numbers are. We are estimating that we're in the millions with damage holistically, but we're still very closely evaluating that and working with the state to make sure that we get the information that they need so that we can get a disaster declaration determination as quickly as possible.
I know usually even at this point, in as much chaos as there is, though, there has to be a back of the envelope number that we've, a range that we're looking at. What kind of range are we looking at here?
Back of the envelope, and I think we're guesstimating that when we look at the damage experienced by Missoula Electric Co-op in conjunction with city and county, that we're probably close to that $2 million figure, but we don't know that for sure yet. That's just based on what we know we're doing right now and what we're seeing in the field.
And can you explain a little bit about too the difference between public aspects of that and the private property loss and how that works mechanically?
How much time do you have?
Well, back of the envelope here.
Sure. So federal disaster funding is nuanced and it is complicated. However, what we will be asking for is what they call a public assistance. The name is terrible, but what it means is public infrastructure. So that infrastructure, those trees that are owned by the city, that infrastructure that is owned by the city or the county, so Larchmont Golf Course, for example, as a county facility. And then Missoula Electric Co-op, because they are a rural electric co-op, can count for that local government kind of component. But Northwest Energy, as a private, does not. And what that public assistance then does is it allows for us to capture eligible costs. They have a book about this big of what are eligible costs. It allows us to record those eligible activities, those eligible costs, those eligible damages that we've suffered, and then seek reimbursement for up to 75% of that from the federal government.
If a city, we had an interview with folks about the boulevard trees undergoing drought, to go ahead and water this a couple of weeks ago. If a city tree during that storm falls on a private residence, who's responsible? What does the homeowner do? Okay. Thank you.
Morgan Valiant.
Don't call me. Morgan Valiant, Missoula Parks and Rec. I oversee a program that has our urban forestry program in it. Right now, as Gordy alluded to, we're very much in triage, coming out of triage mode and really moving into a lot of data collection mode. We've been taking a ton of reports. I think we got 300 or 400 reports that involved us to follow up within the first few days. We are in the process of just documenting. There are abilities, if it's a public tree that has fallen and damaged private infrastructure, we're requesting people record it, take tons of pictures, get it to our office. We will get it in the queue. We have to go out and independently review each of these sites, and there are claim forms. We're going to be processing a bunch of claim forms as well to determine whether or not there is any compensation available. Most times, if that tree is in otherwise healthy condition, and we've seen a lot of failures of healthy trees, just full-on tipped over trees, and there were no known defects in that tree, it is going to be the homeowner's private insurance that covers the cost of that. If there is a known defect in that tree that we were aware of, that we'd already had documented, that caused, that failed, then the city will accept liability for that, and we'll work through our city insurance. The tricky thing about this is teasing apart all those different variables on thousands of different sites across the valley, and we just saw massive amounts of tree failure of very healthy trees as well with this event. And in fact, I wish we would have lost some more of our trees that we already had slated for removal, but a lot of those are still up because they didn't have leaves.
Should people, Morgan, I know this will come out, but should people be taking photographs or taking samples or anything like that to document this?
Photographs for sure. We've got largely our city arborist crew and the Helena arborist crew. All they've been doing for the past 5 days, every day, is responding to get trees off of cars, homes, fences, that kind of stuff. We have not had the opportunity to remove any of that debris besides get it off the car and pile it on the boulevard. And so certainly documenting with photos as much as possible. We are doing our best to address all of those public trees. We are obviously overwhelmed. If anybody does decide to take on removal on their own, I would highly caution them because there's a lot of dynamic forces going on. Certainly recommend that you reach out to a trained arborist or forestry crew to remove that if you need it removed quicker than when we can get to you. Overall, I think we have seen a reduction in the calls of trees on private infrastructure, so we've been able to stay on top of it, and I think we're coming out of that right now.
I realize we're just a couple of days out from this disaster, and I know it would be virtually impossible to try to cast forward just exactly how long it will take for Missoula to, quote, get back to normal, if that's even possible. Is there anyone that can address just on a long-term bird's eye view of how long that might take? So
Whenever something like this happens, we go back and look at past events and reflect on how long it took us to come out of those. The last event, which is in 2015, we had a windstorm come through and we documented 120 to 150 public trees, not private trees, that fell down. And it took us about 3 weeks to clean up that mess, and that was multiple city crews working long days. Today, we logged an additional 100 sites within the first few hours of today, and so I think we'll be well over 1,000. So we're looking at an event that's 10 times bigger, and as Chief Hughes mentioned, this event is not over. We still have a lot of hangers in trees. We still have trees that could be unstable, that could come down in the next windstorm, and so we really don't know how this is all going to unfold, but we'll be cleaning up for months. We'll probably have impacts to our urban forests that we are still seeing within a year or two from now. And so it is definitely, it was a big event.
how can our listeners and viewers help you guys to do your job? I know we're all, this is unprecedented for many who live in Missoula. So basically, what can we do to help all of you folks?
One, adhering to the fire restrictions, as we're going to be heating up here in the next week. We're going to start hitting those triple-digit temps again. Also, if residents can handle their debris on their own, that is what we want them to do. Please don't pile up the debris in the boulevard thinking that city streets are going to come and remove that debris. We're dealing with the public trees and their removal, but please don't inundate the system with your backyard debris. That's your choice.
Yeah.
So thanks, Peter. That's a great question. So I'm going to ask Eric to come up here unprepared, but because United Way has set up a way to link other Eric. I'm sorry. You got double Eric. You can speak for Eric number one if you want. Just because United Way is. The question was, how can people help? It's a great question, Peter. And United Way has quickly stood up a way to match people who want to help and people who need help. But I'm going to let Eric get the details.
You could identify yourself.
Sure. Eric Leibold, I'm the Director of Impact at United Way of Missoula County. We have established a portal, Volunteer Missoula. You can go to volunteermissoula.org, where community residents that are looking to volunteer their efforts to help with the debris cleanup on all lands can go to that site and fill out a form providing their information, their availability, and any specific skills that they can provide. We will compile that list. We'll use that with our additional list of homeowners in need. We will then coordinate with the Office of Emergency Management and Parks and Recreation to put that volunteer power to use. Any additional questions? VolunteerMissoula.org. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess you guys talked a little bit about the kind of volume of 911 calls that were coming in immediately post storm. We were hearing that like some folks were, kind of on pretty long wait times during that time. I was wondering if you could speak to that at all, and kind of whether that's a system that you think can be improved at all, or whether it kind of went as its time.
Yeah, so on any given day, every single 911 call that comes in is going through a triage process based on some of the criteria that Chief Hughes alluded to. When we have that many calls coming through, it's that triage process in hyperdrive. And so it does, if you're calling about a tree branch down and no one is hurt and power lines are not involved, it's not arcing and sparking, you probably are going to have a very long wait time because they're going to put you on hold to get the next 911 call, which may be that tree branch is on someone. And that does take time. As I mentioned, we only have so many circuits, so many available 911 lines that can come in at any given time. But what's critically important to us is that every call gets answered, whether it's by us or by our rollover up in Flathead, so that we can continue that triage even after we've taken the call, because there may be 5 critical calls, and we have to determine which is the most critical of those critical calls. And that does take time.
Do you have a sense of what sort of wait times were for for those critical calls to make those more normal, and it was just kind of a, you know, somebody had a tree fall in the front yard and were calling in that they were getting kind of longer wait times?
I don't know how long some of the wait times were. Those critical calls, and I'll let Chief Hughes describe this as well, but what was happening at that point is all of the resources that were out on calls, and so just repaging them calls were going to get lost, and so part of that was the old-fashioned putting stuff up on a board and communicating with the people that were in the field as to which call they should be going to next based on that prioritization.
I had my assistant chiefs, one embedded with the call center with Adriane down in the 911 center. And then Chief Philip Keating was embedded with Parks and Rec folk, sawing out response routes for us because we had quite the conundrum just trying to get our equipment where it needed to be, which added to that response time you mentioned. I embedded myself at Northwest Energy and triage those calls. We had several gas lines actually rupture along with these electrical power outages from the root systems of trees tipping over and pulling those gas line services out of the ground. So those were, up there. Fortunately, we didn't have the ignition source in most places with power being out, which I think is maybe a blessing in disguise. But still, it's really difficult to say how long for people without actually talking to those folks that were making those phone calls, how long they had to wait.
I'm just curious, this is one of the first, really big events, and I can't remember the official name of it, but the automated paging, that you hear on the radio where they're going, this call, that call, this call, that call. And I'm kind of curious how that whole system was sort of working. We heard a lot of traffic along those lines, and I was curious how did that measure up?
Are you speaking to kind of listening to a scanner? I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I understand your question.
Yeah.
So we have tone and voice paging, which is what you're describing is that different tones go out for different agencies, and then the dispatcher will tell them essentially what the call is. That was occurring, but at some point they're just talking on top of each other, and so that's what I was referring to as far as those calls were coming in. We had them up on the board and were communicating with the field directly so that 911 dispatchers could take 911 calls.
But the thing I was hearing, and this was new to me, so maybe I just didn't pay attention, but I was hearing these paging calls hitting over the air, which normally I'm not used to hearing. Maybe it was just the call volume or something like that, but I was hearing a lot of multiplicity of stuff going on. I don't know.
It was busy. It's entirely possible that there was just radio traffic on top of radio traffic.
National Guard's been here since Friday at about midnight. Do you expect them to stay very much longer?
That's a great question. So part of that state requesting the state to declare a disaster or emergency frees up state resources for us to utilize them, and one of them being the National Guard. So we're very grateful for them and their mission here for our water mission. They're two 500-gallon, they call them water buffaloes, which are potable water that then they can distribute to the public. They will be here as long as we identify that there is a continued need for that specific mission. As we move into different phases of this emergency and identify additional needs that may be more mission aligned for the National Guard resources, we will make those requests. But right now, they are scheduled to be here through the end of Tuesday.
Have you all heard from Northwestern and Missoula can expect to be 100% back on the power grid?
We have continued to be in very close coordination with both Missoula Electric Co-op and Northwestern Energy, not necessarily to understand who's coming on when, but to understand the scale and scope of the outage as it's changed, so it allows us to plan for what those impacts would be. They're making tremendous progress, but the power outages that remain are complex, and they may take a little bit longer. We don't have an end date, sorry, but they're working really hard.
A little plug for that. As they re-energize those circuits that are still down, there is a potential that further down the line system, once those distribution or transmission lines are reestablished, that could energize lines that are on the ground and start fires. We've had a couple of grass fires start due to those re-energizing. They can't see everything that is unseen, right? So I would hope the public, of course, would report those. If you see a line down, don't assume that somebody's already reported it, and continue to report those out.
Well, thanks, everybody. It looks like we don't have any more questions for today. Thanks for coming, and we'll let you know when we do another one of these or where to get information. Matter of fact, I'll let you know where to get information right now so you can tell the public. Missoula.co/storm is kept up to date. It's updated in real time, and that is the #1 place to get information. You can also ask people to look at the Missoula County Facebook page and the Missoula Emergency Management Facebook page, but really the comprehensive location for everything is Missoula.co/storm. Pardon? And we have an information line that is staffed from 9 to 5, and that is at 258-INFO or 258-4636.
Thank you.
And
Wait, there's more.
yeah. We have an emergency alert system that we request everybody sign up for called Smart 911. You just need to go to smart911.com and press create an account, and it allows you to get emergency alerts on your mobile devices. We already have landlines in there, but as we all know, people use landlines less and less. And oh, by the way, there's an app for that as well. Just go to your app store, whatever it may be, Apple or Android, and type in Smart 911 and you'll find the app for it. Anything else? No? Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you coming.
Thanks for that and clean up for me, Oliver.
Oh, well, it started with Butler Creek and ended with...
Thank you.
Sam Wilson from Missoula.
Sam, oh.
Met you over the phone the other day, but
Name with a face. Thank you for introducing yourself.
yeah, of course. Yes, I just to make sure I understand correctly. So like calls are coming in, and they're triaging them kind of as they come in to decide whether to put somebody on hold if it's not like a major deal. Yeah, you guys are actually supposed to go to a board. I guess.
Yeah, we had about 3 giant boards and a smart board.